guys, we're going to finish up the third part of this daily where we're looking at HuK's Dark Templar PvP opening. In parts 1 and 2, we looked at, I would say, a very by-the-book looking game. We didn't get pressured early. We went for Dark Templar and saw that those DTs shut down not only a variety of openings, but also shut down our opponent's opportunity to try to move out into the mid-game. That gave us the chance to expand, get a whole bunch of gateways up, and get a lot of Speed Zealot Archon to defend against whatever he might throw at us. In this game, we see that we were up against a kind of crazy fast warp gate from Oz. He ended up losing a, where is it? Yeah, he ended up losing a lot of units, yet amazingly was ahead of us in probes, is only just slightly behind us in gas, whereas your average bear would be a little bit more behind. But we do have a pretty significant army edge. So those are the edges that we can use to get ourselves a pretty safe early expansion. If Oz, let's just say we're in this position, we know that we have killed off a lot, so this is safe, period. If he's going for tech, okay, cool, he's now attacking. If he's going all out, balls out with the units, we still have plenty left over, so we're in good condition. But again, notice that HuK just builds a Twilight Council now. Excuse me. Focusing on probes, not really building too many of the gateway units, but also note that we have the Stalkers moving out, and what they're doing is they're clearing this area, and this is going to enable us to bring a probe down to here. Do you remember in the last game when HuK had one Stalker very quickly go to the center, and then he had a probe snake around the outside for the DTs? We're doing the same thing here, except delayed, daylight saving style time. Now HuK does something totally doofy and accidentally builds a second Twilight Council. I will note that getting 2 Twilight Councils does not get your Dark Templar tech any faster. HuK sort of realizes this and goes ahead and ditches this one Twilight. But still with the DT, still with a good old flood of gateways. We're getting 6 instead of 5. I would suggest that you try to rely more on 5 until you are a GSL Code S player and really know the difference between these two types of things. But excuse me. We're going to see that HuK has a pretty decent number of probes. Is not going to be going for a Twilight Council this time. Let me go ahead and back up a little bit to some of these interactions. I was talking a lot about the buildings that were going on back home, focusing on those. I want to focus on these unit and unit interactions, or unit to unit interactions. Where we're at this phase, we see this little push out here. We're happy to engage a little bit if we think we have an advantage. But any information you can get on your opponent via his units is going to be pretty helpful. Seeing some Stalkers there. Okay, cool. We know that he's not going some sort of hardcore, really fast. Yeah, I mean, even with this little thing, we're still getting a little bit of information here. He can't be going hardcore, all gas devoted to Colossus sort of push type things. Honestly, whether we can identify that sort of thing or not, it doesn't really change our play too much. But hey, there's Mr. Probe skirting his way along the side of the map again. And notice that HuK is not building extra pylons as proxy pylons. He's building them to help unblock his supply. That's like real trademark superclass player stuff. Still building a big flood of zealots in this mid-game period. We're actually cutting a lot of probe production to get out enough zealots at this phase in the game. And I would just generally steer you clear of doing these kinds of all-ins, just because I want you to get in the habit of playing really long games instead of going for the derp win. And again, we like even amounts of Dark Templar because that means that we can morph into Archons later on. Now, remember what I was saying earlier on? Players will need to wait for 2 observers. And this is not theoretical 2 observers. This is not, well, I'm assuming he's going to build 2 observers, which means I'm ahead 75 gas. None of that. Literally, if he doesn't get 2 observers, you're always positioned to counterattack. And HuK baits this very well. This guy didn't go for 2 observers. So he's now going to get punished really hard. Really hard. The amount of punishment that you do to players is super non-trivial. I mean, sure, players will say things like, oh yeah, if you have S-class control, you can micro your Hellions to kill off a whole lot. But there's units. This, you don't need any sort of micro. You have invisible units, man. You kill them, dude. You just kill them. I think there's another DT somewhere around here hiding, unless it already got sniped off. But okay, how did Oz defend this? Well, he has to go back and focus on his Robotech. We have kind of a late blink, but once again, we have this big force of Zealots. If he's focused on Robotech, we don't necessarily need charge. This, I think, is one of the final critical touches that HuK does to this build. Is knows that almost all the time you can just skip out on the charge. I mean, especially considering that he's identified a early expand, which means that the opponent really can't be getting blink that fast. So he just moves right on up. Tries to kill off the Archon. Force fields abound. He does manage to kill off a good amount of those units. More force fields go down. But look at the stupid amount of Zealots that are streaming into this base. Now you'll note, in the midst of all of this, where HuK has already clearly won, look at what's going on back home in the base. 2 gas, a robo facility. That last step we talked about in parts 1 and 2, where we want to get ahead in the Colossus front, well, we're doing that. But this mid-game attack timing that we saw threaten in Game 1, and that we saw executed in Game 2, still doesn't change this transition to Colossus. Or more importantly, the Observer, to make sure we don't end up getting counter-owned by DT. And after some pretty easy cleanup. This is going to be very hard for Oz to recover from. Here's a GG. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Now, the one thing that I want to discuss at this point in time is something that's a little bit more of the theory aspect of things, because I don't have a replay to show you. Ordinarily, I would want to generate one, but I slept all afternoon and was high on all sorts of wonderful anti-fever medication. Yes! Took a wonderful trip to Dreamland. It was quite snazzy. I've been drinking my delicious yellow anti-flu stuff. So, you heard me talk about all these types of build orders being crossed off. The one that seems that has the most potential to give us a bad hair day is the the player who goes for the 3-gate blink with a relatively fast robo for observers. I will immediately note that in game number 1, we saw our opponent get a pretty damn fast robotics facility. A pretty damn fast. Built at around 5 minutes. That is early. And chrono boosted out that first observer. And it was still close. If your opponent goes for a kind of fast blink and then a moderately timed robo, like let's even say something like 6, you can get up the ramp generally and do a pretty decent amount of damage in the main base. But the question is, what happens when he gets a bunch of blink stalkers with an observer and starts trying to put pressure on your expansion? We were focusing on this Zealot Archon mixture. Is it going to be enough? 2 important things to note. One is, of course, we're going to probably do some damage to him, unless he goes Robo, then Twilight Council. Then we have enough time to get up Zealots with charge and 5 gates. What about if he goes for faster blink and we do a little bit of damage? Well, he has to he has to get 2 observers. He must get 2 observers before he moves out. Even if he's intending on all-inning you on one base, he has to get 2 observers up. And you just threaten a warp in from the side. And you might even say, well, gosh, what if he kills off all my proxy pylons? Warp in a DT at your natural, walk it to a corner, and when you start to see him coming to your base, just waltz right into his main. Exactly like we saw HuK prepare to do in game number 1 that we looked at. And the truth of the matter, and I was even talking to EG's In Control about this before the daily, I was asking about in that Zealot, or I should say in that 5-gate DT player style versus a 3 or 4-gate blink stalker with observer, does the 5-gating player have enough? And the answer is that it just is very, very close. Often these super mad, crazy, hella good Koreans who have like the perfect micro can seem to pull any sort of miracle with the blink stalkers. But some important facts to remember are that with the Archon, he can't do any shenanigans like throw a force field at your ramp and then go hit the expansion. You can just easily use the Archon to break that down. And since you're getting the charge quite early, you'll end up in a position where you're taking some damage and then the charge will finish. You'll have to just stay alive for a little bit, but the longer you stay alive, you'll be able to make use of 5 gates churning out zealots way better than he'll be able to exploit the blink harass. So the answer is that is the tough situation. However, keep this in mind. If the pressure is really hot from a Protoss who's going Blink Stalker Observer, he must be one base all-inning. If he went for an expand, you immediately are going to have a huge breather because he just can't quite reinforce you quickly enough. This is very, very common to see, especially if a player is building 4 gates and going Blink. They just have to keep churning out a lot of Stalkers to keep the pressure up. And if they stop, then this 4th gateway becomes totally useless for quite a while. And if they were going to stop and take an expand, then they probably would be going for 3 gateways anyways. But either way, that is what I want to say theoretically is the way that you deal with that sort of observer 3-gate thing. And generally, if I don't know something, I like to open up games against the computer and just generate the situation where I'll play out the Blink Stalker side, then I'll count how many units I have, and then I'll play out the DTing player, and then count how many units I have, and I can go, oh wow, yeah, this is clearly one person or the other. But again, didn't have time to do that today, so EG's in control. I'd like to thank you very much for helping drop a little bit of knowledge on that one, as apparently he has gotten the chance to play around with it a little bit. And he's HuK's teammate, so I figure he knows. He knows. So what I'm going to do is hop on over to Markio's chat grabber and take some questions. Yeah, there we go. I'd also like to note that the After Hours Gaming League is on right after this of Amazon versus Zynga. Excellent. Yeah, cool. Let me see here. Grim Leaper says, Day 9 in the first game during the final push by HuK, he was down 8 probes. Couldn't those 4 zealots have made a major factor in the final battle, and HuK would have just... wait, let me see. Oh, from Grim Leaper. Just asking about, wouldn't the 4 zealots have made a huge difference for Oz, it looks like he's saying. Wouldn't have... I think that's what is being asked. But what I would say is... I wouldn't worry so much about a lot of those what-ifs in the late game too much, because I think that that's zooming in a little bit too far. If you're playing a reasonable Protoss versus Protoss, you should probably almost always be making probes. Sure, there's some crazy, I'm going to go 4-gate and try to all-in him, and if that doesn't work, I follow it up with Blink. Yeah, there's some staggering there with probes, but I don't want you to be thinking about staggering probes in the late game. It may be true that 4 zealots could have tipped the tide for Oz, but it's not nearly as important as the ideology behind HuK's attack. And I would never want to advise to anyone how to study mid and late game stutterings of like, you stop at 54, and then you build 3 probes, and then you stop at 57, and then you build 2 more, and you stop at 59. That's just almost too much. If you're getting down to that position, I'd probably say that something else is going wrong to put you in there. Alright, so Power After says, Day 9, what would HuK have done against a player that made some kind of walling and 1 cannon in his base? That would hold off the attack without the need of 2 observers. Absolutely true. That player would indeed be able to defend the attack quite well. However, the amount of money it takes to invest in a forge and a cannon, and the amount of time that takes that early on in the game, messes up everything for you. If you were to go forge cannon, if you were to go for forge cannon, you would likely have a messed up robo or say a robo or twilight timing, or you wouldn't really have that many units. And still, with all that said, You can't move out to the middle of the map without that observer anyways. So essentially, you're investing 300 minerals into this forge and cannon that's just going to sit at home and not do anything. That's exactly what HuK wants. That is another way that HuK has purchased time for himself. Forge cannon, not going to come to my base anytime soon. Great. I'm going to research charge for my zealots, build those extra gateways, and then I'll be focusing on winning with my colossus push, which I really like. I'm going to be the biggest jerk with this answer. From Hexokinase. Day 9, how should we play out the game if the opponent also opens with a fast DT? Happy base race. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Sokka and HuK did that at MLG Columbus, and it was hilarious. I'm say good luck to you, man. Good luck. Alright, let's see here. Ba-da-dum-bum. Jason Watkins says, Day 9, do you only buy your comics in trade paperbacks, or do you have long boxes as well? I only buy trade paperbacks. I have incredible self-control not to read each issue of Chew one at a time. I am waiting for Volume 5, which I think is coming out in a few months. It might be out in April, actually. Ooh. I'm going to look that up in the break. Haha. Let's take 2 more questions. Naftman, Dear Day 9, what would be the follow-up to the Colossi push if he defended it and the game went on? The follow-up ends up being quite nice because we have all the infrastructure. We have the 2 robos to build double Colossus production. We have the 5 gateways to be able to build things like Blink Stalkers. We can get some Speed Zealots, though we'll probably be steering a little bit clear from that. But probably what we'd end up doing is we would non-stop Chrono Boost Colossus, take and expand at our 3rd, and then continue right along with regular unit production. The last step is to, of course, go for Stargate Mothership, as that just rounds out the composition nicely. And then you're just in a good old late game where you both have all the good units, Archons, Colossi, Stalkers, Mothership, and you just have to have better army management. Yeah! Alright, cool. Let's see here. Into the Gloaming will be our last question of the day. Day 9, I have played similar strategies and found that I had trouble putting pressure on a 2-base Protoss who walls his ramp with buildings. Do you think this is an effective way for a roboing player to make his Stalker advantage? Allow him to ... and the question gets cut off then. Now that is kind of an interesting idea. Let me see what I think of that. I would say if your opponent... So the only situation where I can see this being an issue is, let's say it's on Entombed Valley, where he takes his expand, sees you're going DTs, and then walls in his own ramp. I'd say it's critical at that point in time to be going for as fast enough DT as you can, because we saw the DTs will arrive around 7 minutes. If he's going for a 2-gate, like 3 Stalker push with an expand behind it, then he actually won't have enough money to wall off the front. I would say the problem is that he's not getting, you're not DT rushing fast enough. If he goes for too fast of an expand, I mean, we literally saw Oz do the following build. Gate, 2nd gate to build 3 Stalkers total, and then instantly Robo. I mean, he did go for this 1 Zealot at the start of the game, but that didn't delay his Robo by more than 5 to 10 seconds. So, if even with that, Oz is struggling to get the Observer out in time, and he's broke, there's no way a player who early expanded and then got a Robo as fast as possible both has the money to wall off, and has the money for the Robo and Observer, and has money for the Nexus, and most importantly, has money to build units.
because the last circumstance there that has money to build units is how you'll end up breaking him. Because you won't just be sending in 3 DTs. You'll be sending in 3 DTs, your 3 Zealots, and some extra Stalkers. It's a whole push that happens at the start of the game, one component of which is the DTs. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and get set up for the After Hours Gaming League. I hope you enjoyed this fever cast. And I will be back in 15 minutes with the After Hours Gaming League semifinals between IBM and Zynga.